cruising around on Winnie one day, I looked out and saw a large fish like a foot and a half below the surface. And it was like a 28-inch walleye just up there sunning himself. And I
In
thought,
what depth?
I was probably in 31 feet.
No
And
way.
he's 2 feet down because there's community spots on every lake. You don't need to go to those. That's the cool thing. I went out where there was nobody. That's just the tip of the iceberg. The tournament thing, I'm pretty much all in on. Like it. Anyway, I want it. And yet another hint. Next question.
What is up, my favorite fisher people? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode here of the Cast a Line podcast, episode 6. Now, rolling right along. Comments, feedback, please say what's on your mind, whatever that may be, good, bad, otherwise, on topic or not, don't care, just join the conversation, will you? In today's conversation, we're going to be talking with my buddy Crappie T, who, first of all, is one heck of a crappie fisherman. Let's hope so, because it's in his nickname. He's also one heck of a jumbo perch fisherman out there in Idaho. You probably know the lake that he fishes a lot. You probably heard of Cascade Lake. But what we're focusing on today is walleye tournament fishing, because Crappie T, the last 2 years, has decided this is something he really wants to get into. He's no stranger to walleyes, but the walleye tournament trail is a bit of a new thing for him. So something that I've thought would be really cool for this podcast is to talk to some people who can give us an inside scoop on what it's like behind the scenes, and especially in the process of figuring it out, putting it together, and coming up on the scene, so to speak. So we're going to learn a little bit about what he has figured out as it comes to using Livescope for catching walleyes, as it comes to locating big walleyes versus smaller walleyes and getting those big walleyes to bite when you know the fish that you want to catch. And he's got a few juicy little stories from fishing with some of the pros, some of which are probably big names that you know from the National Walleye Tour if that's something that you follow. So I thought that was pretty insightful as well. He's a charismatic figure, he's got a lot to say, and in his own words,
I want it.
He wants it.
Next question.
Tommy G, better known as Crappie T. What's happening, my man?
Well, we're enjoying a balmy Hawaiian day here in Idaho. It's like 60 degrees today. It's probably warm everywhere, but won't last forever. But, you know, we can't change it, so let's go with it, right?
It's like 55. It's like 55 in Des Moines here today, January 31st. I'm pretty sure if you really want to push it, I think you can get on ice if you walk through the shallow stuff and the stuff breaking away from the shore. But I don't know. I might not fish in Des Moines again. I might not fish in Iowa again after this next week.
Well, kind of the bottom line with ice fishing is it sucks. I mean, you can't move around. It's just not, I did it a long time. I grew up in North Dakota, as you know, and during a long winter, there sometimes gets to be a pretty big lull where you got nothing to do. So it was kind of appealing. But in my life right now, with what's been going on in fishing, it really seems like a drag. So I have not done it. We did go last weekend. It was windy, kind of 46, 7, 8 degrees. Couldn't take it anymore. We went crappie fishing. Couldn't locate the hogs. Got into the aquarium in the river. Got a ton of bites. Caught a ton of fish. They were only just like, you know, it was something to do. That's it. You felt the bite. Yep. You set the hook. You were in a boat. Couldn't be that bad, which for winter time it wasn't, but it was amusing, but better times to come. I don't know where the hogs are. Maybe you know, Bloom, where are the hogs on CJ Strike Reservoir?
You'd have to send me a map, first of all, and then I'm sure I could point them out for you.
I'm sure you'd pull some wizardry, but we're not going to give you that chance because I couldn't break it down, and I drove around here and there where they usually are in the basin, which is 60, 70 feet. It's kind of a river channel. It's the Snake River, blah, 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 blah. I mean, I saw some hogs. We did get a few. but it was not a hogorama. It was like my dad would have said, it was an outing.
Gotcha. So
And
if we're going to talk about where the hogs are, let's talk about a lake first of all that we've both fished before. And I'm not talking about Sakakawea. So you had recently told me that Mille Lacs is your favorite lake on earth. It's one of my favorite lakes outside of my actual favorite lake, which is Sakakawea. I did get a chance to go there this last November. I did fish some of the spots that you gave me, which also worked just as well as some of my spots. What is it you love about Mille Lacs? And not just like, I don't want this to be like, here's how you fish Lake Mille Lacs, but what's cool about Mille Lacs that might relate to anybody else's lake wherever they fish?
the thing I like about Mille Lacs is, like, when I was studying it, the first AIM tournament we were ever going to do on Mille Lacs was coming. So I watched every Mille Lacs video ever known to man. And what everybody has said is that, through the history of time, like, let's say you come up with a new fishing lure, you get into the design process, and you want to know if your new fishing lure, the doohickey, let's call it, really works. Well, the place to check it or test it is Mille Lacs. I think all these companies, when they want to know, will a walleye even remotely be interested in my new lure, you test it in Mille Lacs just because it's filthy, filthy with walleyes. I mean, whether I have been there in July before and I've been there in June before, not early spring, but literally every place you look on a map where you see a big point coming offshore to a break line, start at the break line and move in, and depending on if it's windy or whatever, I mean, they're there. Let's say you get tired of fishing the break lines and you want to go out and test what everybody knows in Mille Lacs where there's fish out in the mud. There's fish out there. You go into the southwest side, into the bays, into the weeds. There's walleyes in there. It's like you can find some fish, whether it's, the Mac Daddy or not, but there's just so many fish in there. It's so fun in that you actually start thinking you maybe actually might know what you're doing. It gives you a false sense of security because, I mean, I literally, the spots I sent you to when you went on your little fall expose to Mille Lacs Lake, I sent you a few map pings like, oh, I went here I think our tournament there was in June. And when we went there, it was obviously a way different time of the year. There was mayflies everywhere, in your mouth, on your back, everywhere.
Gross.
It was a huge bug hatch. Went into a spot that looked like there should be fish. There was no one there, and I thought, oh, this is cool because there's community spots on every lake. Like, it's like when you go to Sakakawea and you go to Shell Island in August thinking there's going to be no one there. Well, you're insane. There's going to be 50 boats on there, all snapping jig wraps. I mean, there's community spots on Mille Lacs too. You don't need to go to those. That's the cool thing. I went out where there was nobody, and I'd kind of been in the area, had never seen anybody there. There was those bumps out in the middle of the bay. They're infested. I went to a shoreline. The wind was blowing in. There was bugs all over the water. The walleyes were just on fire. Took a fire tiger jigging wrap just to see if they were walleyes, not knowing what was going to go on. Pitched it out. Never even got to the bottom. 24-incher. Pulled like 13 out of there the next hour and thought, my God, I'm a wizard, which I'm not. And so it's just one of those places, because of the sheer amount of walleyes, it just makes you feel good. It's always nice to get a bite. Everybody likes to get a bite. And it's nice to get it on so many different things. Before I went there, I'd never really fished big swim baits before. Watched a lot of John Hoyer's stuff. He snaps big stuff. In fact, I saw him there. He was snapping big stuff, and it was working. I put on a big, tentacle-y looking, what was it, no, it was a Kalin's big giant, tickle
Tickle
tail,
shad?
4-inch thing
Tickle tail?
on a 1/2 ounce head, rubbed a little bait pop on it and chucked it on some fish, snapped it once. The second snap, boom, rod doubles over, and I was like, wow, this is the motherland. I mean, it just feels good. But there was times, where 2 days later, the lake went dead calm. It was 85 degrees outside. There wasn't a ripple on the water. We were dying of heat. The fish just wouldn't bite. Went in shallow, and the water's crystal, as you know.
Yep.
And I put a 16th ounce jig and a leech on a mono rod because I was getting desperate. I'm like, they got to bite something. They're everywhere. Tossed it out, watched that jig. Just gets to them, like 5 of them race to it, and bang, it's fish after fish. And this was in another area of the lake that I'd never been to, Isle Bay or something like that. So it's like every place we went, at least you got a chance.
Yep.
You would cruise around for 5 minutes and you'd see a pot of fish, you'd spin on them and throw on them. And that would lead to, as you know, on Sakakawea, you might start out on a piece of structure and it leads you to something else. And you're like, wow, this is better than I thought maybe where we were going to get them, So it's just one of those places that it makes me feel good to fish there because they'll bite so many different things. I mean, during a lull, you toss on a blade bait that's almost got rust on it because you gave up on it. Give it a couple and whack. They bite it. Which is why if you're going to test a walleye bait, go to the mothership. Anyway, love Mille. I think it's a great place. Don't care at all if you can keep a fish. Wouldn't bother me if they never change it. I just want it to stay the way it is. How's that for an explanation?
That was great. I would.
A little longer than
I
you
love
wanted.
the fact that you want feedback and validation already.
Anyway,
I think the cool thing about it is not that we can catch walleyes different ways in Sakakawea. You can catch them in different places, but I would say there's definitely a main bite at any given time. The majority of the fish are in a certain depth doing a certain thing, and most people are catching them on spinners or jigging wraps or jigs and minnows depending on time of year. But at Mille, it's like, yeah, I mean, if you're enjoying catching fish in the weeds and you're like, I just want to go see if I can catch them on deep rock piles, then you go do it and you catch them on deep rock piles, and you can use so many different things. It's fantastic. It's a fun place to go.
100%. Sure. Love it. I like the aspect that you can fish your strength. Like, let's say you are a swim bait fisherman or a jig wrap fisherman, or let's say you just want to put a slow death rig with a 7-foot leader on and go out in the mud and pull it. You can kind of do, if you're not a caster and a troller, boy, there's boatloads to do, and the fish eventually you're going to run across some that bite because not all the fish are doing the same thing at the same time. And that's a prime example there.
Yeah, absolutely. So you were there this last time fishing a tournament. You've been getting more into tournament fishing, mostly the AIM circuit, I understand,
mostly the AIM, do a little bit of the FM Walleye Club stuff. They have a tournament on Big Pine, Fall Classic on Cormorant. Enjoy those 2 lakes a lot. Both have a ton of walleyes, fish differently. But yeah, the tournament thing I'm pretty much all in on. Like it, want to do better. I learned so much this year. I thought I learned a lot the first year. Last year was kind of an epiphany year in that, I mean, for example, a lot of people, I mean, everybody knows that not all the walleyes are on the bottom. I get that. I knew that too. But cruising around on Winnie one day, I looked out and saw a large fish like 1.5 feet below the surface. And I thought, wow, must be a carp or something. I cruised over there, just getting close enough before it spooked. I got probably 18 feet away, and it was like a 28-inch walleye just up there sunning himself. And I
In what
thought
depth?
I was probably in 31 feet,
No
and
way.
he's 2 feet down. And I was shocked. I was like, oh my God, okay. So that was something that clicked. Then all of a sudden I started, you know, thinking, all right, I've seen a lot of these suspended marks, not had a lot of luck with them, but I was, as you know, from the times we fished together, I mean, catching fish on a jigging Rap is just sheer fun. And we were having some success in that. Switch tactics really quick after seeing Mr. Hogzilla at 2 feet. Basically decided I'm going to have a slip bobber right here, set it like 10. Because I would see fish in 8, 10, 12, 14, but the water's crystal, they can see forever. I thought, well, I got a chance. You know, I'm not going to change on the fly. I'm just going to see how it goes. So started doing some slip bobber fishing at suspended fish. We just got absolutely blown away to see fish that were 16 feet down come up 8, 10 feet to eat a leech. I mean, literally mind-blowing. And I kind of always knew, I always knew that there was a lot of fish that suspend because you watch a lot of those Great Lakes videos. Green Bay, Lake Erie, those guys are in 110 feet of water, and they show their graph, and there's like loaded with walleyes at 30 feet.
Yep.
Nowhere near the bottom. Well, the same thing happens on all these lakes. Changed my tactics, used a bunch of different stuff, kind of got into the search bait thing. That was another huge epiphany. So much fun. Yeah, it was a great year. I like going to all those different lakes. I like trying to break a new place down in like 3-4 days. And then of course, you know, tournament day is always a different thing, you know, like a couple of the tournaments the day before the tournament, you know, it rains 3 inches with lightning. Well, that'll tend to move fish around, but you know, you got to go with it. Everybody's in the same boat.
Right.
Love it. Love it. You know, I like Leech. Leech Lake is right behind Mille. Those fish flat out bite, and a lot of the same techniques apply. Like fishing, whatever they'll bite on Mille, they'll almost bite the same stuff on Leech. And I don't know which lake has more. I think it's Mille, but there's just a ton of fish on Leech. I like the way it sets up. You can fish deep, suspended, shallow rocks, all that stuff. First time I ever used a orangish, reddish jigging Rap was on Leech. We kept a 17-inch fish to eat. Looked in the live well, and there was like 2 crawdads in there, and I was like, ooh, huh, crawdads, huh? So instantly start digging through the box, put on a red jigging Rap. First pitch out, I swear, in the rocks. Bam.
Yeah,
And I'm
speaking
going to
of
do
big,
an NWT event this year, which is way out of my league. I'll probably be what you call a donator. I'm sure my money will just go to the guys that are pros. I'm not a pro. Don't want to be a pro. Well, wouldn't mind. Take that back. Edit that out. I would like to be a pro, but I'm not. I'm a dentist, you know, that gets to fish a lot, and I think I got a chance. Probably it's a small chance, I don't know, but as you know, I did spend my growing up years on Sakakawea. The NWT event is on Sakakawea, which is the only reason I'm doing it. Got a couple spots in the back reaches of my brain where, like, as a kid, like, didn't catch a lot of big fish, but there are a couple spots I caught some 8-pounders as a kid, not knowing anything. I know no one will ever be in those spots. Not that that's a key, but I like you when you do an event against the best, you learn more. Like if you're a track and field runner, if you run against Usain Bolt, you're going to pick up more tips and you're going to get more into it. running against the best, fishing against the best, than if you fished your local Clear Lake tournament with guys that are going to go out and troll spinners. How's that for an
Absolutely.
analogy?
That's a perfect analogy.
I thought you'd like it.
So the question that I want to know is, to me, it seems like big walleyes are almost like an entirely different species. And being a guide, I'm just programmed to catch fish. I've caught plenty of big fish, but it seems like when I'm trying to target big fish, they do different things. What have you learned tournament fishing trying to specifically catch big fish that tells you that they're different than the run-of-the-mill 17-inch table fare?
We kind of just start by side imaging areas, and you'll find a pot of fish, not knowing if they're big or small. But like everybody says, big walleyes seldom are in a pack of 20, right? So we'll find, you'll run a shoreline or run a deep area, and you'll, see a whole school of fish, and so that's like a starting point. Then we kind of just go from there. And I don't think the big fish, from what we found, literally every time, are super far away from maybe some masses, but it seemed like the big fish were off to the side. We got to the point midway through the season when we would see a group of 8, 10, 12 walleyes. A, looking at the size of the marks, but B, just due to the number of them, we wouldn't even throw at them. We got to the point where we did catch a lot of fish, even in summertime, in shallow, but it wasn't that many. And I tried and tried and tried to force it and find those fish in 8, 9, 10 feet of water that were halfway down. And you'd find like one a day. Well, you can't win a tournament on one a day. So we got out deeper off the break lines. Summertime, bugs are hatching. When bugs hatch, minnows eat bugs. And so I think the whole system tends to, in many lakes, want a deep component very close by. Not to say if we were on a break line, we didn't zigzag it. Check a little shallow, up on the break, check a little deep. Getting away from the masses and attacking and chasing and chasing and chasing suspended marks was huge for us. Like in 30 feet of water, the fish that was 10 feet down or 5 feet down, I literally would follow him until he either ate or left. If I was able to get that suspended fish to bite, he was 26 plus every single time, every time. So then the cool thing was, then we totally started transforming our presentations. And that's not to say that there wasn't big fish deep. I learned off Livescope what big fish looked like deep, which I'm sure in today's world everybody probably knows what that is. I don't know. It's different for everybody. But recognizing what we were looking at and then going after him and not giving up. Like, I used to have a rod or two on the deck. Now I feel like I'm on the Bassmaster Tour, where I've got like 8 rods ready to go. And everything's got something else on it, depending on whether I see a shallow suspended, a super deep fish, and if, like, let's say you see a fish on the bottom at 30 feet and he just looks like a glowing star. He's big. I might start with a jigging Rap. If he acts like he's disinterested, then I'll go from next thing to next thing to next thing. And during these tournaments, wanting that fish so bad, amazingly, a few times after cycling through baits, we were able to get those hogs to go, especially in the state championship on Winnie. That was huge. We attacked them, stayed with them, basically badgered them to the point where I think they ate the bait just to get it away from them. And I wished I had done that much more earlier in the year. The adage that, some fish just won't bite truly is a thing, I believe.
Yep.
But after talking with Tom Wynn, who I think is unbelievably crazy, stupid good at catching and tricking fish to bite, and he's very helpful. I appreciate that. The things he's kind of clued me into, which hasn't been a ton, but little hints, has helped a lot. I mean, that new Northland eye candy that came out, I don't know if you've
Hmm.
used it. I've
I
dabbled with
haven't.
that. And truly, it really does work, along with a lot of other things. Live bait, jigging. I mean, generally, when spring left, I never used minnows. This year, we used minnows many times in the middle of summer, and not just rigging, using them on other stuff. And to my amazement, that was one of the rods on the deck. They wouldn't bite a jig and a crawler, a jig and a leech, a jigging wrap, on down the line. I even went so far as just putting a slip bobber down in 30 feet of water, 28 feet, and making it just sit there right in front of them. They wouldn't bite that. And then all of a sudden you'd flick a minnow out there, twitch it once, and bonk. Watching fish's behavior certain times of the year to certain baits, we really learned a crazy stupid amount. More than I ever have in my life.
Yeah, and I think all the stuff that you're saying is exactly why I think Livescope is changing tournament fishing. And people have this argument about whether or not Livescope is cheating or hurting the fishery. In a general sense of the word, I don't think so. I think it's just another tool to help you fish differently. But the one thing that I think it's very helpful for is identifying whether or not it's a fish you want to catch before you throw at it. Because in the old days, in tournaments, so many tournaments were won trolling, especially big crankbaits. Just put a really big bait out, cover a lot of water, and then the bigger fish will bite the bigger baits, yada, yada. But now, if you know where the big fish are, you can, like you said, you got 8 different things ready to throw at him, and it's you're willing to spend time to make that one fish bite. Where I'm not going to mess around with that because I can go find other fish that will bite. But now those are your tournament fish. You got to find a way to catch them.
For
And
sure.
you've used Livescope a ton in the last couple of years. Is that a big key for tournaments? Would you agree?
Watching the Bassmaster thing, I watch a lot of that stuff just to see if what happens to me, tournament wise, happens to these guys. And there's so many of them for something to do this winter and watch. I've watched a bunch of that, and that's a big topic on the Bassmaster thing. Is Livescope, is ruining the sport, all this stuff. It's ruining the fisheries. There's no way. I mean, what it showed me this year is how many times we get denied.
Yep.
And it's not a little, it's a ton.
Yep.
Sure, you know where the fish are and it makes you excited because you got a chance. But by no way, shape, or form do they all bite. On Mille, a little better chance. One of them will bite, but you're also probably throwing into a 20 fish pod. I think Livescope is a super fun tool. I mean, it's no different than when sonar came about. I mean, years and years and years ago. I mean, what are we going to do? Go back to the little green Lowrance box? I think that people should use their head when they're using it. I mean, if you get into a pot of fish, like for example, the last tournament of the year, there was a day before I was going home. I went out onto a local lake, west central Minnesota. Couldn't catch fish, saw them all over Livescope. They wouldn't bite a jigging wrap, a leech, a night crawler, nothing. Eye candy, anything. And I was like, wow, this is great. It's one of my last days of the year, and I can't catch a fish. So went into a big old point with a definite weed line on it, saw monstrous schools of perch, looked right beside him, and there's walleyes just waiting, watching him swim in and out, eat perch. Got a green jigging wrap in my hand because I love green jigging wraps. Flip it in there, it doesn't even get to the bottom. So that day I caught 33 walleyes in a few hours. Well, I didn't keep any of them. So if they're worried about Livescope and people, if there's fisheries that the walleye numbers are low, well, then maybe alter the limits or something like that.
Right.
But there's just so many times daily where you see tons of fish and they won't bite, Livescope or no Livescope. In
Yep.
fact, in those situations, you might be better off not using Livescope. There was times where we could not catch a fish. We were seeing them on Livescope, pitching to them. And as much as I hate trolling, we ended up catching some of them out of necessity in a tournament because they wouldn't bite anything else. We ended up putting on slow death, old school, trolling through them, and caught some. Mm-hmm. Non-Livescope related, because Livescope wasn't the thing.
Yep. Yeah, I think there's plenty of ways to locate fish. And so if you're just looking for numbers of fish, Livescope, again, it doesn't make the fish bite.
Sure.
The only thing that I think it separates, and again, in no way, shape, or form do I think it is an unfair advantage or should it be illegal, but it does give you that ability, I think, to a better degree to not only locate a big fish, like you can locate a bigger fish on side imaging, sonar perhaps, but to track that big fish and know where it goes and keep throwing stuff in its face. Like I think if you're not using Livescope in tournaments, you might kind of be falling behind though.
No doubt, no doubt. In order to be competitive in tournaments in this day and age, you do need to know how to use it. And there's a lot of people that know how to use it, and there's a lot of people that really know how to use it. And there's a big difference there.
Stuff. You sent me this other photo of one of the biggest walleyes I've ever seen in my life. Absolutely mammoth, out of the Columbia River, right?
Yeah, a friend of mine sent me that picture. It was a friend of his that caught that probably, 3-4 weeks ago. I found it impressive. I've definitely not caught a 19-pound walleye. I've never seen a 19-pound walleye. I've seen 10s, but not that big, and I thought, holy smokes. You'll show that picture right here.
It's already been shown, my friend.
Oh, well, I'm behind the 8-ball. Anyway.
I'll show it again.
Pretty cool hog, and whoever caught it, kudos to you. But on a side note of big walleyes, I did catch my biggest walleye of my life this year, the last tournament of the season, the day before the tournament, of course. In pre-fishing, we were kind of scouting a new spot, came around this huge main lake point into this inside corner. I'm scanning with Livescope. At the very right edge of my screen, I see like a big tall mark and kind of know where my transducer's pointed, but I just wing it. It's like I was set at like 70 feet. So I wing it about 70, thinking it was worth a cast. I don't know, had a Walleye Nations Creations Death Jig on, which is one of my favorite baits in the world. Anyway, I basically clicked the reel, took like one crank, and it was like I was hooked on a 30-pound carp. And so I set the hook, and the rod was just boom. And so it's battle. I'm like, wow, this is not my usual walleye. I've never felt anything like this. Maybe this isn't a walleye. Maybe it's a trash fish. Maybe it's a carp. Maybe it's a paint can. I don't know. It's big. Anyway, it gets to the boat, and my partner, he's like, giant walleye. And I look over, and it was like a 31, 32 incher. It was a 10 plus pounder, and I was pretty stoked. I was less stoked because if it would have happened one day later, in the 5 minutes before that, we just pulled like a 25 and a 24. So between those three fish, we would have been sitting really pretty for the tournament.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
but that's fishing, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I was just felt super lucky. That's the biggest one I've ever caught. I've seen, I'm sure, a lot of those pro guys catch, in all these tournaments this year, five fish, I should say. I mean, people are weighing 39 to 44 pounds for five fish. Well, simple math, as you and I could do readily, would tell us that's 5 8-pounders. So
Yep.
that's a fish of a quality to catch five in a day that is pretty unreal, unheard of. Don't know what you call it, but that's a big accomplishment. My goal is to embark on that this year. Let's hope.
What tournament was it? What lake?
That was on a lake just outside of Fargo, small FM Walleye Club
Oh.
tournament lake deal. It was not on any big walleye factory. I mean, the
Wow.
lake is a walleye factory, but it's a good place to go to catch some really nice fish to eat.
Mm-hmm.
Not that we don't keep any, but there was, even in that tournament, there was some hogs caught. Maybe not quite as hoggy as that one giant that I caught, but I think the guys that won had in for five fish were in the 30, I'm going to say 2, 3, 4, 5 pound range. That's 5, 6 to 7 pounders. That's a good day. That's a good day. But basically, the tournaments, yeah, if you aren't catching 20, if you want to be in the top five, you'd better have five fish that are over 25 at least, or you're out.
Yep. So, again, as we further this conversation on tournament fishing, I, for the first time the other day, watched Tour Level Gold on YouTube, which, for those that don't know, basically, I think it's done in production with the National Walleye Tour, but they followed four pros around: John Hoyer, Max Wilson, that young dude that was the
Owen
rookie,
Wilcox,
Owen Wilcox,
Dwayne,
and Dwayne Helm.
Jom.
Anyway, fascinating. I ended up watching all 10 of those episodes in a day and a half. Absolutely loved it. Have you got to meet any of those guys? Do you have any cool stories from fishing some of these tournaments yet?
First, I'll start you with a little Leech Lake story. This was a cool thing. My partner and I were fishing. It's the tournament. We're in a non-winning spot. We're catching eater-sized walleyes. Anyway, he's like, got one. It's not big. And we both simultaneously kind of look over the side of the boat as he's lifting a 16-inch walleye out of the water. And a mouth the size of a basketball opens up underneath of it, and just before it engulfs, it's a muskie, like a 50-plus inch muskie. Just before he takes it, obviously the water's crystal, he sees us and turns, and I was like, oh my God. If we'd have got that thing in the boat, I was gonna, even though it wouldn't have counted, I was gonna take a picture of it for Denny Fox, who's the AIM director or whatever, just because that was cool. I mean, I've seen a few muskies, but this was a muskie. I mean, his mouth was literally, you could have stuffed 5 softballs in that thing. I mean, this was a fish. But anyway, back to your tour level gold thing. I think those guys are all super accomplished, like you. I'm totally addicted to that. It's great. I look for different things in those videos than maybe most people do. But again, I was fishing at Mille actually, coming in on a point. One of those fishermen was coming out on a point, and we'd caught several nice fish really quick, fast, and kind of scanning around, checking the whole thing. Big shoreline point coming off. And one of those guys in their boat, they were actually practicing for the AIM tournament too. They're ripping big stuff, and I can see they're catching fish. And the pros are sneaky. You saw a lot of that on Tour Level Gold. I mean, before you go into the boat landing place, they'd take a wide turn so nobody can actually tell exactly the direction they're coming. That's just the tip of the iceberg. There's other sneaky things that happen. Anyway, so obviously pre-fishing, you're catching good fish. You don't use a net. That's like sacrilegious. Anyway, you lean over the side of the boat, you unhook your fish. Anyway, this guy does this like 3 times, and we're definitely within seeing distance of seeing this happen. And so we get close enough and we kind of pass each other. And this fisherman, who actually was on Tournament Level Gold, he's like, "Wow, can you believe the size of the bass in this lake?" And I'm like, I literally sat there and chuckled. I'm like, yeah, the bass sure are biting, you know. It's a good thing you didn't lift them out of the water because they got such big teeth. And,
That's funny.
You could have lipped them and said, "Wow, look at this bass," or whatever. But anyway, those guys, I mean, they do it for a living. So, I mean, I get it. They take all that attention to detail, as you saw in the videos, and they put it into their tournaments because, you know, they do make a pretty good living, some of them, just fishing, which how big of a dream, you know, would that be to, you know, win a Ranger boat or two and make a couple $100,000 fishing for 4 tournaments in 7-8 weeks time total with pre-fish, 8 weeks, whatever. Anyway, back to your point. Yes, I love Tour Level Gold. I can't wait for next year, I should say. And I'm super excited at that NWT event to observe 1, 2, maybe drill some hogs, compete, get in the mix, just be enthralled in that whole situation. I want to see what it's about for myself. I want to see if I can compete. The thing about it that I have now come to the realization, and this Tour Level Gold talks about it, is you realize how good their teams are. Like, for example, John Hoyer, who won Angler of the Year and won the championship. I mean, he's got some pretty good sidekicks, like Dwayne Jelm, who won the Francis Case event. He's a quality fisherman. You know, Dusty Minky. All those guys are super great walleye fishermen, and they all share information. So that kind of is a big deal, and big would be with a capital B, I would say. You know, me, it's just me. I'll be going out trying to break it down and letting it rip, but I'm fine with that. I mean, Tom Wynn, part of his deal is he doesn't have a team and does it himself, and he's been successful. Not that I can compare myself to any of those people. I can't, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. It's going to be big. It's going to be fun, which is the main thing. If fishing isn't fun, we're out. Let's quit. You know, I think everybody that's watching this, or me, you, we do it because it's fun, not just to get a fish, maybe to, in today's world, for me to eat. I want to see if I can fool them. I want to see if I can catch them. I want to test my ability to find them. All that stuff. Anyway, it's going to be cool. Love it.
The last time the NWT was at Sakakawea, I want to say it was 4 years ago, 2020 maybe.
2020.
2019. Anyway, I I volunteered to be a boat driver for one of the cameramen. So we were following, and at the time I had my smaller boat and it was supposed to be windy. So I told him, I'm like, look, I can't run all the way up to the Van Hook Arm. I don't have enough gas. I can't buck all those waves. He said, no problem. There's some guys that are in the top 10 that are fishing close to Garrison. Perfect. So we ran up to some of those spots, and there was a ton of people in one of the major bays within 20 miles of Garrison. I'm assuming you and probably some other people are figuring that out if they know Sakakawea. But I was shocked to see the locations of some of those boats. And I was like, what are they fishing? So there's some things, first of all, that as good as the Lake Master map chip is, it doesn't have all the structure of that lake nailed down. So they were on some stuff that I was like, that's got to be 60, 70 feet of water. And I drive up by them because we have to drop the camera guy off to get in. Actually, Dusty Minky's boat, he was one of them. And I'm like, oh, this is 35 feet of water. Oh my God, I had no idea. And yeah, you will learn a ton just by seeing where they go, I'm sure. And I learned a ton hauling that cameraman around, especially because it was mid to late September, cold front. It was weird fishing. It's the toughest time of year to find fish then anyway. So that one day for me kind of opened up a whole new world about how I can keep my clients on fish in the middle of September.
Yeah, I noticed that too as well. Lake Master chips, I even run it here. We found a place Sunday on a local lake while we were out crappie fishing that it's supposed to be 60 feet of water. And all of a sudden I looked down at my graph and I was like, whoa, an undisclosed bump here. It's 25 feet deep. Wasn't any fish on it, but it's something to file away and not
Yep.
think that on the Lake Master chips it's 100%. It's not, but yeah, you got to kind of witness some of that NWT action firsthand that way. It's pretty cool. I mean, it's fun to be immersed in something like that with a whole bunch of people that like it as much as you do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like going to South Dakota and hobnob with the pheasant hunters during opening weekend of pheasant hunting. Everybody's passionate about it. Same thing
Mm-hmm.
with this. And to say I'm passionate about it is like the biggest understatement of this year. I'm all in.
Yeah, the other cool thing too is, so after that, I volunteered for the weigh-in. So what I was doing was, after the guys were showing off their fish, they'd take them back to the holding tanks, and we were then sorting fish into the ones that were swimming, which they were going to try to release, and the ones that were belly up, which we were going to throw into a chest to, clean for a charity fish fry. And first of all, if there's one thing that stinks about tournaments when you're fishing deep lakes, you can imagine in the middle of September, most of those guys were catching some fish pretty deep. They tried their best. At least they tried their best to release fish, which I appreciate. And I could tell a lot of the guys, they would catch a 30-incher and they'd put it in that tank and they'd shake that tail and like, oh God, I hope that one lives. Like, you could tell that they care. Like, they know they have to do this for the living, but they don't want to ruin a fishery. They really don't. So I was appreciative of that. But it was interesting to see how many local guys were coming through weighing some pretty good bags. So, like, if you know a lake and you're a good fisherman, you got a shot, man.
No question about it. No question. The local thing, which is that's part of my nemesis on going to these new lakes in Minnesota. Like, we've got a tournament at Lake of the Woods. I'm super jacked.
Oh,
Love to go to Lake of the Woods. But all these other guys I'm fishing with against, 99, well, if there's 100 of us, 99 of them are from Minnesota. I'm the
yeah,
only one that's not. And I've never
yeah.
been there. So I've kind of, the local theme, like if we were to have a tournament on Cascade for big perch, I probably might be likely at least a semi favorite in that I
Mm-hmm.
know their usual haunts, habits, what baits work, what baits don't work. I'd have at least a starting point. Most of these places, I'm just showing up and going fishing, and I'm okay with that. I'm starting to become less okay with it because we've tinkered with some success, and it feels good. It feels really good. Anyway, I want it.
For the last few minutes that we have, we're going to do a little rapid fire stuff. First thing that pops into your mind. First question, what is your favorite new presentation that you caught big walleyes on this year that you've never done before?
I'm going to say throwing Walleye Nation Creation Death Jig style lures. And I'm going to say, I can't just say one thing. It's going to be, I do like using plastics. Those are probably the two things that I used a lot this year that I never really had. I was just kind of fish night crawlers, leeches, or minnows. Now, more of the time, I don't use those as much. Question 2.
Okay. What's a presentation you never tried that you want to try next year?
I'm going to say I can't refer to it as a presentation, but there's a few lures that I'm interested in, both by Berkeley. One, if you watch the I'm Just Looking for Next Bite, you've seen that show, right?
Yeah.
They just did one on Lake of the Woods. They were using the new Berkeley reaction bait called the Finisher. I'm anxious to try that. I'm anxious to try a new crankbait. I'm not going to say the name of it. Everybody can do their own research from the same company. I'm only going to not say the name because I'd screw it up. It's spelled funny. And yet another hint. Next question.
If you could fish with one current NWT Tournament Pro, who would it be for one day? Just because you think it'd be cool to fish with them. I'll give you some time to think. I'll give you my answer. The more that I watch stuff about John Hoyer, oh my God, I think he'd be the most fun guy to fish with and potentially the most educational. I would love to fish with John Hoyer for a day. Just throwing that out there, John. If you're listening, bring me in your boat. Come on, buddy.
Just throwing it out there as well. I'll give you we'll take we'll go back 10 minutes ago. The guy that says, God, the bass are really biting. Guess who it was? John Hoyer. So I think he is at the pinnacle of the sport. I think he's great as well. I can't say that he wouldn't be the one. I can't. Yes, would I die to go fishing with John Hoyer? Yes, it would be unbelievable because I think he is at the top level of the sport. From watching head to head, I like excitement. I like emotion. Max Wilson would be a fun one. You know, kind of a different kind of a character, but obviously he's done super well in a lot of tournaments. I think he knows what's going on. I've spoke with Isaac Lockich at the Mille tournament. He was just sitting there. He was going to take some people out. He is a super real, just down-to-earth kid. If you should call him a kid, he's not a kid. Really intelligent fisherman. Did really well in head-to-head. Mastered electronics. Gives courses on showing people how to run their electronics. Isaac would be another one. Super, super good fisherman. I mean, the list of people, I mean, John Hoyer, obviously you coined it. He would be at the top. But, I mean, Dusty Minky, any of those guys that are in the NWT that probably are in the top 20, I probably would learn so much by going with them. Any of one of them, I feel they're all accomplished. I think they do a great job. But John Hoyer's got a unique sense of humor. He says things like in tournament level gold, if you kind of dispel some of the fishing and just listen to what he says. So but Max does too. Like, do you remember when Max was telling his co-angler how to fish the champ swimmer?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember?
He was saying that basically do it like John Hoyer's doing or something like that.
So exactly, he said, you know, you snap it up, you hold it for a second, and let it fall in a semi-slack line. And he said something like, well, at least that's how our Lord and Savior John Hoyer
Yeah.
does it. And he said he's the queen of the champ swimmer. I mean,
Yeah.
trying to put a little dig on John Hoyer, that's great, but I guess when you're at the top, you probably take some shots every once in a while, and he's at the top. Won Angler of the Year and the championship. He won several boats. He probably won a whole bunch of other tournaments. I mean, the guy's great. If John Hoyer would happen to listen to this, both me and Bloom think you are at the pinnacle of your sport. So kudos to you, and see, it's a cockawea, baby.
Who's your favorite for Angler of the Year next year? Is John Hoyer going to repeat?
I mean, you really have to think that he's a favorite. The only thing is on this year's schedule, it's an Erie, a Green Bay, a Sakakawea, and like something else, a Huron. It's like a lot of Great Lakes events. Green Bay's considered a Great Lake, I guess. I don't know. I've never been there. Let's call it big places, full of walleyes.
Yeah.
So
Big
when
water.
it's like that, maybe not early, but during the more warmer periods of time, you know, a lot of people, a lot of your really experienced and good trollers might do well. I am not a troller. John Hoyer has proved. Dwayne Jelm has proved this year. Dusty Minky, a lot of those guys proved. Owen Wilcox, all those guys proved you don't really need to troll. And so it'll be interesting to see on those giant bodies of water, which they did it this year, the Sault Ste. Marie, Max won it, not trolling. He was throwing reaction baits, probably some search baits, blah, 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 blah. I don't really know. But so you wonder, you know, on having that many Great Lakes events, whether some of these guys that are experienced Great Lake trollers can beat the live scopers. That'll be a test. I really don't think they'll do it.
I think it could be. I think because they're fishing all these big bodies of water in the Great Lakes, it could be a sneaky guy that comes out of nowhere.
Yep, could be. It could be. It could be. You picked John Hoyer. You already said you're going to pick John Hoyer for the 2014 Angler of the Year.
I said I wanted to fish with him, and I asked if he would repeat. I did not pick him.
Okay, who are you going to pick? I'm going to pick Dusty Minky.
I like that pick.
You can't pick the same one as me. Go again.
No, I said I like that pick. I'm gonna go with Isaac Lockage. It's his time.
That's a great bet. I mean, I think that is a super intelligent pick because he's locally from close to that zone. I think a guy that spends so much time up there. I mean, it could be Max Wilson. Max really, I've talked to him a few times in the parking lot. I've asked him some questions. He's been fairly open. A lot of these guys are fairly helpful as much as they can be, you know, right before a tournament. I mean, why would you tell some idiot from Idaho that's traveling there to try to steal their money anything? Well, you wouldn't.
Yeah.
But they give you a little bit.
Yep.
It's cool. I love it.
Very cool. Final question. When are you ever going to make another YouTube video, Crappie T?
You know, this year we actually, my friend Niles, who kind of did some of the camera editing work, all that stuff, we were out, he brought all the stuff, had it all charged up, and it never failed. We'd go out fishing without the stuff and just hammer them. Like, we'd catch 75 perch over 14 inches. We'd go out roughly the same area the next week, have all the gear on board, ready to do it, and it'd be like they were off that day. Or they were off that day until, we're going to fish till 4 o'clock, and they start hammering at 3 o'clock. And yes, could we have taken out the camera stuff and started over? But it was like we were all geared up, the mics were on, everything's ready to go, and it was just a failure. That happened several times. And part of it is when I go for a week, I'm gone, I come back. When I do any fishing, it's kind of like decompression time, because we go 12 hours a day, full on. And then the tournament, you're bundled up in nerves and wondering, will your fish still be there? Will you catch anything? But blah, 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 blah. So you get back and it's like, phew, I don't think especially toward the middle of the season, once you've had it a few times, it's like, I'm not really super excited to go fishing for a couple days. I think I need to clear my head. And so, but yes, this year, Niles, we've already got it planned. We're going to do it.
Good deal. I really think you got a great personality for YouTube if you were going to do it more. If you were consistent with it, I think you could do well. I think people would enjoy watching you. I enjoy watching you. So I hope you do. But I understand that with tournaments, that it's hard to do both at the same time. Like the times that I've done a YouTube video, like when a guiding client is coming along and they want to do the fishing package thing, it's a lot of stress. So I get it. And when you're fishing for a tournament, it's even more stress. It's longer days. It'd be hard to do that.
The coolest thing, which Niles has told me to do, and now that I have a windshield boat, I bought a Ranger last year, got out of the tiller. We're fishing a big water boat now. Anyway, on the windshield, I could put one of your little clip thingies that's got the little snake thing, and the YouTube thing comes on it. But that, and then just, basically let the thing roll, change the battery, let it roll, because there's always some stuff that would be cool, whether I'm speaking to the camera a lot. Niles said he'd be willing to, wade through all this material and make a little something out of it, even if it's a 10, 12, 15-minute deal. But might do that. It would be pretty good. I mean, and it wouldn't come out till after the fact. So God forbid we did find the honey hole. Nobody would be able to say, "Oh, it's right next to that yellow house on shore on Leech Lake."
Yep.
But anyway, thanks for having me. Hope 3 people found it amusing, maybe 10. Let's shoot for the moon.
Shoot for 20.
We're really doing it. We're really doing it. Anyway, you and I are going to meet. You're going to come out to Idaho, maybe March-ish time frame or something.
Yep.
We're going to do a little one-day crappie-a-thon. They'll be on by then. Give you a little taste of Idaho crappie fishing. Not that you might not, there might be open water by then. Who knows? If it is, tough luck. You'll have to still come, and because we've got to have our one-day derby so that the winner of the thingy can go fishing with you.
We got to do it for Wyatt Hands. We got to do it.
We're going to do it.
We're going to do it. We're going to make it happen. Everybody look out for Tom Gudmestad this year at the NWT at Sakakawea. See where he finishes.
Root for me, please. I need help. Show up. Cheer. Make a banner.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
I think if you could finish top 50 in your first big-time walleye tournament, that'd be pretty impressive.
I would be extremely disappointed with that.
Yeah?
I'm looking at 10 and under.
10 and under. Okay.
10 and under.
Let's do it.
It's going to happen.
I want to see it.
It's going to happen.
Rock and roll, man.
We'll see, everybody. Root for me. Not John Hoyer. He doesn't need it. He's probably going to win anyway.
Thanks for stopping by, Crappie. Appreciate it.
Have fun, everybody. Peace out.